I'm Alan Wardis, and you're listening to Think Radio.
They're wildly popular. I bet there are 50 ghost paranormal investigation groups just in Colorado alone.
Wow. Kym O'Connell Todd and her husband Mark Todd joined me recently to talk about their newest book, Wild West Ghosts, an amateur ghost hunting guide for haunted hotels in southwest Colorado. Stay tuned to find out what they learned along the way on this episode of Think Radio.
Think Radio is supported by the Gunnison Country Times, Gunnison's locally owned hometown newspaper, and by the Western State Colorado University Office of Academic Affairs. Think Radio is also supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can become a Think Radio patron, visit alanwardesmedia.com. That's ALANWARTES media.com.
Mark and Kym, thanks for coming in today.
You bet.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. All right, so really this is such an interesting topic. Ghost hunting.
Okay.
We've got to, we can't just dive straight in. We have to go back a little bit.
Okay.
And pick up. Mark, you're a professor at Western. You're a poet, an award-winning poet. Together you've written several works of fiction.
Yeah, three novels. Yeah, three
Yeah.
fiction novels. Yeah.
Okay. Kym, you're a communication specialist. You've worked in the newspaper business. You work in media business.
Right.
How do we make the leap from poetry and feature editor at the Gunnison Country Times to ghost hunting?
Okay, Kym, you know the story.
Oh, I knew you were going to give it to me.
Well, I'll start you and then you finish it.
That's great.
All right, so we just finished our third book with our publisher, and we were having a celebratory dinner, and the publishers asked us, so what's your next project? And Kym popped up and said...
I said, we're thinking of doing something on haunted hotels in Colorado. This was after the second Cape Cod, and which I should never have had any. And
well, now wait a minute. It sounds like that was a surprise to Mark.
I think it was a surprise to all of us. Yes.
Well,
You surprised yourself when you said
sort
that?
of, yeah. Actually, we had talked about it just a little bit,
yeah, but 10 years before.
yeah, we didn't do anything with it, but that night we mentioned it to our publisher, and he said, yeah, do it, I'll publish it. So
Just like that.
Just
Exactly.
like that,
Mhm.
yeah. Of course, we weren't sure we would have anything to publish, but in the 10 years before, actually for the segue, this is how the book came about. But the 10 years before, we had lived for 9 years in a house that was, well, it's haunted. I don't know how else to describe it.
or it seemed to be.
Well, a lot of people have stories like that. So I don't-
Everybody has
right,
a story
right.
like that.
Yeah. Tell me about your house.
Well, it's out in Doyleville. It was at the time, still is, and we rented it. And the little house was one of the first death in the community occurred there, and the body was buried somewhere on the property. We didn't know this when we lived there. We found out later.
The first death,
the
first violent death?
No, just the first
No.
person who had died back in the early part of the, well, I guess the last century, the previous century, the late 1800s. Yeah.
And we were told that it was one of the first homesteads in that area. We didn't verify that.
But and I know when we lived there 9 years, and our girls who were young then had seen things, had actually seen full-bodied apparitions, and we thought, yeah, kids, whatever.
We never saw them.
We never saw something like that. But a couple of times we did have things we simply could not explain happen.
Things like what?
Okay, well, the piano playing tunes in
Piano
the middle of
would
the night.
Play at night.
Yeah.
And,
And of course, we have cats, and so you could say...
Well, that was my next question.
Well-
Because my cats play
Yeah.
tunes all
Yeah.
night, too.
well,
But
these were tunes.
These are actual tunes.
You could recognize these tunes. And we also had our remote control on our TV, which was sitting on the bed with us. It would change channels.
It was an old dish deal where you had to do a sequence
Those old
of
dishes, big ones.
keystrokes to get your satellite your dish to go to a different satellite. It would switch over with the right sequence. every once in a while.
So you had ghosts who knew how to operate a remote control?
Yeah,
Well,
apparently so. If they could play a piano, they also could operate a remote control. And then that thing with the cat litter, that was pretty interesting.
We had been on vacation, and we came home. It was late at night, and we'd had a friend taking care of our animals while we were gone. And I went into their laundry room where we had the cat box, which was tucked into a corner and nowhere's near any water source or anything. And I went and looked at it and said, I'm just going to empty it. So I got a plastic bag and I brought it back into the bathroom or to the laundry room, and the cat box was full of water. And it hadn't been just like 30 seconds before that. So that was one of the weirdest things. And we had, the usual light fixtures on and off, and we had water faucets turning on and off. And
this wasn't an old house.
Oh yeah, those things are so routine. Usual.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
The most. And we finally realized, unbeknownst to each other, that there was a certain place in the house we both felt uncomfortable. And we ended up having, it was in the stairwell, and we always felt uncomfortable, like somebody was watching us. And so we finally went down to that stairwell one night and just sat down and said, look, we all got to get along here. We're not leaving, and apparently you aren't either. Can we just get along? And after that, it didn't feel as spooky. Nothing stopped happening, but it didn't feel as uncomfortable.
They just wanted a little attention.
I guess so.
I guess so.
So when you piped up to your publisher and said, hey, how about we write about ghosts in hotels in Colorado, that wasn't completely out of the blue. You were already in the mindset that these things might be real.
Well, a
Yeah.
little bit, but neither one of us had ever had any paranormal experiences before living there.
Yeah. And we had no idea what to do. It was just anecdotal training, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, so why hotels, though?
Oh, well, when we had the idea before, we thought, wouldn't it be cool to do something like that? Because Kym had stayed at the Delaware up in Leadville and had some little experiences there. And we knew there were stories we'd heard anecdotally. But when we finally got around to proposing it, when Kym proposed it to the publisher, all of a sudden, ghost hunting had become the rage on TV. We finally hit a topic that was trendy and that was on its crest of popularity. And
so let's back up there, because that's a writer talking.
Yeah.
We finally hit a topic that was trendy, right? Because that's something that writers strive for.
Oh, yeah.
You're always
Yeah.
looking for that thing.
Yeah.
If you start, if vampire stories are popular, so you start writing vampire stories, by the time you get it done and through the whole process,
It's all werewolves.
It's changed topic, right? And so it's very seldom you manage to match up with an audience, with a niche.
Yeah. Okay, so you were looking around at ways to take advantage of this trend.
Mm-hmm.
That still doesn't tell me how you settled on hotels.
Yeah.
No,
Kym,
we
yeah,
really weren't looking around for a way to capitalize on this. Like I said, when my daughter and I had stayed several times at the Delaware Hotel, and we ran into a number of people that would do ghost or paranormal weekends, and they would go to different haunted hotels on weekends. And that's kind of where the thought started, or the idea began.
Spooky slumber parties.
Yeah, more or less. And so we set up the criteria. We decided, let's do something. Let's not do the Stanley Hotel, which has been done to death.
Right.
No pun intended. And so we wanted to do off the beaten track, places that didn't have much attention drawn to them.
How'd you find them?
Just research
Yeah.
and phone calls and
And we ended up.
Wait! You just call up the concierge and you say, "Hey."
Well, we would look online and we'd pop in haunted hotels Colorado or haunted houses Colorado, and then we would poke around and find out and contact the people who had made the comments and then we compiled a list of about 35 places. Not everybody did not welcome us. They didn't like the fact that they had a reputation, even an underground one, about being haunted.
Even though it meant they might be able to host spooky slumber parties?
A couple of them, we actually had to revisit with them, pitch to them 2 or 3 times where they said, okay, come ahead. Because we said, look, this doesn't necessarily have to define you as a haunted hotel place, but for a certain cadre of people who are likely to pick up this book, it might increase your booking revenue. And so they bought into that.
So that did it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mark, you've described this to me before. When you set out to do this, you weren't really sure you were going to find anything.
Oh, yeah.
You were just
that's
writing
right.
a book.
Right. We were kind of nervous. In fact, to begin with, we had not planned to do investigations. We were going to visit the places. We researched the history. We found as much as we could. We went to places to take photos, to do personal interviews, interview staff, owners, and collect stories. And so that was the original notion. And then we thought, wouldn't it be fun to try investigating ourselves? And so that was when we decided to add that component to the book. And so having committed to do that, we thought, okay, what if nothing happens?
Right. Well,
That wasn't the
Kym,
case.
had you ever done an investigation like this before?
No, we had no experience whatsoever. We bought the equipment. We tried to research how to use the equipment and what to expect.
And we watched lots of
We watched
reality
lots
TV
of ghost
shows.
yeah, ghost TV shows, to see how they were using the equipment. We really didn't know what we were doing. And one of the things that we did want to focus on in this book is we wanted to use a minimal amount of equipment that didn't cost very much money, so that anybody could do it. They could go there for a weekend and just buy some apps for their phone or their tablet.
They have those.
And get
Yeah,
get by. Yeah, and a lot of the apps are free. Some are very low cost. You can spend as much as you want on
well,
this
like
hobby.
anything else, I expect.
And since then, we have spent a little bit more money on it. But when we were doing it for the ghost hunting or for the ghost hotels, we were keeping it minimal so that an average person could do it without spending a lot of money.
So not just a horrendous learning curve then.
It was a learn as you go kind of a curve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We did get better at it as we went along. We weren't shy, just like anything else we've done, and Ellen, I know you have too. If you don't know how to do something, you reach out and say, "Hey, I need help. I need a mentor."
I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. They're wildly popular. I bet there are 50 ghost paranormal investigation groups just in Colorado alone.
Wow.
Yeah, just
Whole groups of
almost
people.
every community seems to have one. And so we started reaching out to people that just call them up cold, and basically we say, we don't know what we're doing. We need your help. And everybody was real generous. They were real
I'm
nice
sure,
about
yeah.
it.
And we ended up going on some investigations
With
with
some other
other
groups,
who'd been doing it a lot longer than we had.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot from them
Picked
as
up a
well.
lot of tips. Yeah.
Well, so what is ghost hunting equipment?
Well,
what do I need? I mean, I'm thinking
yeah.
of ghost busters, of course.
Right,
And
right.
they need the, don't cross the streams.
You're right. Well, surprisingly, a lot of the equipment is already, it's simply adapted from things that are already present. The big theory behind paranormal activity is that there seems to be a correlation between increased electromagnetic energy and the manifestation of paranormal activity. So a lot of the equipment is focused upon trying to detect elevated energy patterns and energy levels. So electromagnetic EMF meters, same kind that you would put up to an electrical fixture to say, is this live? And so you measure that. We have video cameras, digital audio recorders. We take flashlights, ask ghosts to turn them on for us or turn them off for us. And they would. And so we were basically trying to document what we could do and have something we could throw up in YouTube videos.
So you've had ghosts turn off your flashlight.
Yeah.
We did.
We had them turn on our flashlights.
Uh-huh.
Yes, you can imagine our surprise the first time that
That
happened.
happened.
It didn't happen all the time, but in the 13 hotels that we did, it probably happened in
14 hotels.
We did. At 14. That's
Yeah.
right.
Please don't say you did 13.
Well, actually,
That was the original
the
plan.
original plan, and then we had another one pop up, so we
And it was a
did
good-
it as well.
Yeah.
But we have probably gotten flashlight results from about 6 of the hotels now.
Yeah.
So describe this to me, okay? I'm standing here with my flashlight.
Yeah.
No, we set it on the table.
Set it on the table.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
It's sitting there.
hands off, so you can't.
You can't be accused of
Of-
manipulating it yourself.
Right.
Okay, it's on the table. You have the feeling, because of your equipment, that you're in the presence
Of something.
of something.
Yeah.
Hey, turn on the flashlight for me.
That's basically it.
Yeah.
And then it just instantly comes on.
Well, we mostly have had them flicker. We've asked them to turn them off. They generally will flicker, or sometimes they just downright turn off. We've only had one time really where it actually turned the flashlight on.
We were doing an investigation, and Kym said, "We're tired of people turning them off."
I was tired. I was getting cocky, and I said, "How about just turning it on for a change?" And they
Immediately did.
And this was not. This is the flashlight that we use. It's not an easy one to turn on or off. And we've tested it at home numerous times, thinking that we have a faulty flashlight, especially after the first time this happened.
Well, you would.
Yeah, there's something going on here, and we've never gotten it to do it at home.
Yeah, it functions perfectly. Except the only time it quote unquote malfunctions is when we're in a haunted hotel.
Yeah. Well, I like your strategy of having him turn it on. I don't know, asking a ghost on an investigation to make the room dark doesn't seem like such a great idea to me.
We did a lot of our investigations in the daytime.
For good reason.
You don't want your imagination to run away, and you want to be able to, if you're doing an investigation, you want to see what you're doing.
Yeah, you want to be able to see where the exit is.
Right,
Really
absolutely.
All right, so you set out then to write this book. Publisher says, "Go, I'll do it." At what point did you cross over the threshold from, let's just go see what's happening, to, whoa, something is happening here?
Well, that happened pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah, it happened for the very first investigation. It's kind of surprised us.
Yeah, and then from there on in, we've had several things happen that we can't explain.
Yeah.
Well, like what? Let's talk about some of those.
Well, the first one that we did, we set up our equipment, and we immediately, when we walked into the room that was supposed to be haunted, actually, I think there are several in that hotel. It's in Paonia.
The Bras Hotel in Paonia. 1905.
As soon as we walked into that room, all of our equipment died. All of it. I mean, our batteries were completely drained. And we had heard that happened, so we had brought all extra batteries, and we inserted them. We did our investigation. We went to leave, and as we were going down the stairs from this room, the owner called up, and she said, "Be sure to take some travel brochures. They're in that room." And we had set our equipment on the bed in that room, but we're always really careful to leave everything as we found it.
So we straightened it all out.
We had completely straightened it out, and we had had our equipment downstairs. I ran back up to get the pamphlets, and there was
perfect
big fanny print right on the bed. That, I mean, I was just 2 seconds before that, I had completely straightened the bed out. That was the first thing that happened on the first hotel that we did.
And we found out that wasn't uncommon to see handprints or fanny prints on the various bedspreads in the hotel.
Really?
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting. It didn't happen while we were there, but luckily we went back, and that's when we saw it.
Well, so you've talked about the electromagnetic theory of being able to detect the presence of something like this. What's the theory behind these physical manipulations, turning a flashlight on or leaving an imprint on a bed?
Yeah. Alan, there are no experts in this field. That's why it's paranormal, right? It's not normal.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of theories about what's going on, and we've reached the point where we realize that regardless of what we may or may not think, we have to decide that, okay, there's something out of the ordinary going on, and so we're collecting information, and the more information we collect, then maybe we can create a hypothesis. I think ghost, Kym and I we both agree, I think ghost is a convenient, overly simplified term for what may happen. It may be something totally different. It may be something we just don't understand yet.
Well, we all have preconceived ideas about what that is.
Yeah.
But do you have a working hypothesis based on, because you've been doing this a while now, beyond the book, you've continued.
We have.
Right. We have. And it's a way, we found ourselves being branded as ghost hunters, and of course every time we do an investigation and post it, we make a pitch for our book. So it's it's still tax deductible. We're still writing it off as promotion for the book. But it's taken on a life of its own, sure. Well,
so what do you think, Kym? I mean, what's going on here? If you had to say, okay, the working hypothesis of the day is...
I can't answer that. Mark always compares us to Scully and Mulder.
In the X-Files.
Yeah, I'm Scully. He's Mulder. So he's much more wowed by these things, and I'm a little bit more skeptical. I try really hard to find explanations to debunk it.
But we have had some real head scratchers.
We have had many head scratchers, and I can't, I really don't know. We've tossed the ideas around of maybe multidimensional travelers, parallel universes. I really don't know how some of these things could have happened, and there might be explanations. We just haven't found them yet.
Well, what are some of the common explanations that you found that do debunk the idea that this is some conscious entity from elsewhere?
They're subsonic frequencies submarines operate on. It's their communications because the sound waves travel really slowly and deeply through the earth. If you hit an area where there's a strong presence of subsonic frequencies, it seems to mess with brain chemistry and can cause heightened hallucinations.
Really?
If you're very strong, if you sit very close or in an area where there's strong elevated electromagnetic energy already, it makes people feel paranoid and like there's somebody watching them. So there's been experiments that pretty well prove that heightened electromagnetic energy and subsonic frequencies are two things that can artificially stimulate a sense of not being by yourself.
And yet, then you'd have to explain why old hotels around Colorado all seem to have heightened
and places that have no cell service.
So one explanation begs another question, right?
I like Kym's idea of perhaps multidimensional rubbing together of two planes. The other one that really makes sense to me goes back to Einstein's theory of general relativity, in which he says time and space are connected. They're part of the same weave. And if all things in space can exist simultaneously, like this building and the one next door, they exist at the same time, even though we're over here. All time also, according to Einstein, exists at the same time. And so it's possible that in some way we are simply tapping into a different time by some mechanism that we don't understand yet, that where we can see replaying something that's going on as real to them as it is to us, except we can't see it as real sometimes.
Which would explain some sightings which seem to involve being unable to interact.
Right, what are called residual hauntings.
Where you're just observing something that seems to have happened at another time.
The two forms of activity, there's residual hauntings and intelligent hauntings. So residual, it's like a playback, so to speak, and you're simply an outside observer with no ability to interact. And then intelligent hauntings is when you do seem to get intelligent responses, like they're really talking to you.
Residuals probably don't turn your flashlight on.
No. Right, that's a good example. And on our digital audio recorder, we've picked up what seem to be simple answers to our questions. The term, and if anybody's watched the Ghost Show, they know this, they're called electronic voice phenomenon, EVPs for the acronym for it. And an EVP is just that, it's electronic. So the explanation behind what happens is that you're not really having a conversation that's being communicated by sound waves. It's a manipulation of the electronics actually inside the recorder. So
the apparition itself is able to manipulate going on.
Yeah, they're adjusting the electromagnetic sound waves, electromagnetic energy, instead of that point of contact when the sound is turned into input that's electronic. At that point, they are actually embedding sounds that we can interpret as voices.
Well, that's not all that far-fetched.
No, and there's a lot of examples of that happening, and we've had some as well.
Well, I've heard some of your recordings.
Yeah,
they are compelling.
They're real head scratchers, aren't they?
Yeah.
Think Radio is supported by the Gunnison Country Times, Gunnison, Colorado's locally owned hometown newspaper. Think Radio is also supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can join the Think Radio community of patrons, visit alanwartismedia.com. That's ALANWARTES media.com.
So as you began to really get into this, what would you point to and say that was our biggest surprise? The thing that, You know, we knew we were in territory that was going to have some weirdness to it, but the thing that really caught our attention the most.
You know, the first thing that happened to me is when we would get responses that called us by name.
That's true.
That
happens all the time.
It happens all the time now, but we did it several times before we heard the first, hello, Kym, hello, Mark.
And
that
this
got our
is
attention.
without you saying,
We didn't-
hello, I'm Mark.
Yeah, we realized we don't have to identify ourselves. They know we're there. Tell them about the African-American woman in Egan's dream.
Oh, we did an investigation at the Cripple Creek jailhouse. It's an old jailhouse that has been
It's
since
the
turned into a museum.
Yeah, Lawman and Outlaw Museum.
And we did it with another paranormal group. And it was at night, and a couple of us were going from room to room doing some experiments. And we were in one room, and this was a place where the spirit turned the light on.
The flashlight on, yeah.
And there evidently was an African-American woman who lived there because she took care of the children of the inmates, and they had a special room. She had her own room, and they had a special room for the children, like a dorm room. And anyway, my daughter, before we even went there, and before we even knew
That there was a orphanage.
Right. We didn't know about this woman, the caretaker. We didn't know about the children. We didn't know any of this. My daughter said, I had a dream last night, and she said, there is a black woman talking to me. And she said, the children are looking forward to you coming. And it meant nothing to me then. But when we got there, I realized what she was talking about.
Okay, you just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, so those kids in this, and we were in the room with this woman who was the caretaker, who was the dorm mother, or whatever, and she was the one we asked to turn on the flashlight.
And she was the one who did that.
But they apparently knew the day before we were coming and would happen to be on that level where that experience was going to be. They knew ahead of time we were coming and knew who we were.
Okay, so come on. These are not.
That's not residual.
Randomly located spikes in electromagnetic energy. I mean, these interactions that you're having seem to be with personality.
Well, and one of the possible explanations for at least some of the activity is a persistence of a personality after death. And some of these, I don't know how else to explain them.
Well, have you come across those where you feel that you know who you're dealing with and have researched them when they were alive?
Well, we have tried to do what research we could before we have gone to the hotels. When we were at the Creed Hotel, we were investigating a room that Calamity Jane had stayed in. And we got a very clear EVP that said, I think I'm going to shoot you. Well, now we didn't fear that we were going to be shot, of course, but we think that might have been a residual haunting.
Yeah. But at the same time, we also we heard a noise in the hallway, and we were the only ones down. We were the only ones in the building, and Kym said, I think I heard somebody in the hallway walking. And so we asked, he said, is there someone else here? And we got a real clear voice that said, Bob. And Bob Ford, the man who from the Jesse James gang who had assassinated Jesse James, went on to Creed, and he was killed in Creed while he lived at this hotel.
Right.
It could be total coincidence, but the fact that is there somebody else here, and we get Bob, and we didn't get Bob Ford. That would have been better.
Right.
Right. But so we got a combination of residual and what sounded like intelligence.
Have you ever felt threatened?
Not at once.
No, we never have.
Not at once.
We've had some experiences where afterwards we thought, should we have been scared? But at the time, we've got our gizmos out, and we're trying to document and record, and so we're so busy in our protocol and what we're doing, it never occurs to us to be afraid.
Because that's what a lot of the TV shows thrive on.
Right. You'd think there were only demons out there based upon the TV shows.
Well, have you ever encountered something that you thought was
negative?
Negative.
Well,
no.
The one over
in Norwood.
Yeah. So we had one where we felt truly uncomfortable in a room and had really strong electromagnetic energy in there too. We walked into this one room. The first thing that we got was flashlight, and as soon as we turned on the flashlight, man, it just turned out immediately. All of our batteries drained. We lost everything, and we had just a real strong sense of, we shouldn't be here.
Yeah, that was the only time out of all the investigations we've done that it felt kind of creepy. Just the air felt heavy. It just felt like we weren't welcome there.
So you're not willing to say that those things don't happen then?
Well,
some people have that experience.
All the other times we've never had that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of like I have heard that people on drugs, they can have a good trip or a bad trip depending upon their state of mind. And I think if someone goes in fearful and apprehensive, then that's the experience they're going to have. We always have approached this as when we go into a place, we don't expect it to be haunted. We go in as optimistic skeptics. And if something happens, I'm the first to say, cool. And Kym says, let's think about this.
Mm-hmm.
But we've never gone into a place expecting anything to happen, so we're not disappointed.
Is there another book coming?
Probably. we found a niche,
It's fun to watch you guys because Mark didn't hesitate and said probably, and Kym was starting to shake her head. Yeah. After all you've experienced, what second book would you want to write? Where would you go to find something interesting to report on?
Well, like I said, we've developed an unexpected fan base. This has been one of those niches. I think I told you, Alan, before when we were chatting. When we put this project together, we were trying to set up and pre-promote the book. And we developed, a platform online through various ways. And by the time the book was out and 6 months later, we'd had close to 1 million social media hits on the project.
Before the book was even published?
Well, within 6 months of the book.
I see.
The 6 months before and the 6 months after, we'd had almost a million social media. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we have fans on 6 continents.
So there's just a little bit of interest in this topic.
There
evidently.
is.
We've had several invitations to go ghost hunting in Scotland and in England. And
Are you going to go?
I don't know. We'll think about that.
Oh, come on.
It would be fun.
It would be fun. If we didn't have horses, right?
I'll take care of your horses.
Well,
Go.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to that.
So probably something that has to, we'd be turning our backs on a roller coaster ride here that we probably shouldn't.
Yeah, sounds like
so
a lot of fun.
we have a number of projects in mind that we've toyed with. There's an interesting museum over in Montrose that has lots of paranormal experiences. We've actually investigated it 4 or 5 times, and it might be fun to do a whole book just on the variety of things that go there to research the provenance of all the objects and all the things.
And that's a place where those buildings have been transported from elsewhere, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's right. And it hasn't seemed to have interrupted the activity. So it wasn't linked to a land; it seems to be linked to wood.
Yeah.
To the location. Yeah.
I wonder if the workmen who transported the buildings had any stories to tell.
I don't know.
I don't know. The workers all do.
Yeah.
Well, so speaking of television, you've been on TV.
Recently.
Tell us about that.
Well, we had investigated a place here in Colorado that got the attention of the Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures series.
Mm-hmm.
And so they contacted us to get some background on the place, and then eventually invited us to come over and be interviewed. And then we got a chance to be part of the investigation, so that was fun. So it aired
last Saturday.
When this airs, a week before this conversation.
Yes.
Well, where can people find it? Is it online?
It is online.
It is online. It's already been posted. It's actually been. You can stream the whole series online, and
No, but I think the
you can go to the Travel Channel.
Right, you can find it on the Travel
And then
Channel.
of course you can certainly go to our
YouTube.
to our blog. We certainly posted the link there.
I bet you know the address to that.
I do. rightinthethick.blogspot.com.
And right is spelled W-R-I-T-E.
Yeah.
Right in the thick.
Yeah. Our business name is Right, W-R-I-T-E, Right in the Thick of Things. But our blog is Right in the Thick, one word, .blogspot.com.
One last question. Let's suppose I'm living in a house and creepy things are happening. I smell the perfume in the stairwell and the cigar smoke and the water turns off and on and the cat box fills up with water. And what advice do you have for people? What should they do about that?
Wow.
Well, we're not really Ghostbusters.
Yeah, we're not Ghostbusters.
We investigate, but we're not really Ghostbusters. There are a lot of theories out there. The burning, the sage, the salt, whether they work, I have no idea.
We had one person contact us. They had just had their house saged, and that's when the activity started.
So I don't know how effective that is. I think I would, first of all, really look for other explanations.
The hotels that we did had long histories of multiple people citing things, so they were a safer bet. When we have done investigations of individual residences, we can almost always find a reason. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's a matter of state of mind, and I think there are a lot of times our imaginations really do get away from us, and if it's really truly something that's that seems to be unusual. You know what we did ourselves way back when in that haunted house is sit down and say, let's have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to help a lot.
But most of the time, there's really not something under your bed.
Most
of the time there's not. Not as often as there is on TV.
Mark and Kym, thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Alan, thanks for inviting us.
Think Radio is supported by the Gunnison Country Times, Gunnison, Colorado's locally owned hometown newspaper.
Think Radio is a production of Alan Wardis Media. The show's associate producer is Kat Seibert. Music by Issa Forrest. You've been listening to Think Radio on KWSB FM 91.1 in Gunnison, Colorado, from the campus of Western State Colorado University. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Think Radio.